Hi, I'm Stan Smith. This is my wife, Joanne. And thanks for coming to be with us again, because we're kind of telling a story of how God's walked me through a brain tumor. I came pretty close to death, apparently, closer than I think I've ever been to death before. But anyway, bounced back. Now, Joanne and I sometimes minister together. I have married a character, and so has my wife. And when we minister together, there are a lot of times we just kind of clown around with each other, and we don't try to act real pious. It fascinates me. I don't know that Jesus acted real pious sometimes.
We couldn't act pious. We don't even know how to.
Well, anyway, so we don't act very pious sometimes. But one thing we enjoy doing is we enjoy ministering to the sick. And we have learned that the presence of God, if the presence of God is tangible and felt in a meeting, what will happen is it's possible for people to get healed in that presence. And we've seen God do large things and small things. One man went off dialysis. I was completely surprised. It had nothing to do with my faith or anything. I didn't know I was praying for a man with dialysis. No, all it was is the presence of God brought healing. But our prayer is that during this broadcast, God's presence will touch you. And if you need healing, it's not going to be our great prayers that do it. It's going to be the presence of God that brings healing. But in any event, in my own story, as I came out of surgery and I was aware, goodness, from the questions they were asking me, I could tell that they weren't real confident that I was a functioning human being. They kept asking me my name and where I was and what day of the week it was and questions like this. And apparently you can't take it for granted that a man after brain surgery knows the answers to those things. So this is what I went through. And you can imagine, having a somewhat goofy personality, what it was like to try to prove that I was perfectly normal. Who in this world is perfectly normal? Who do you know that's normal? Nobody wants to be normal. We all want to stand out a little bit. And so here I was trying to prove I was normal. It was a task, believe me. Finally, I got the nurses and I said, look, we've got to make a distinction between clinically normal and socially normal. And they said, you're right. And after that, they decided I was clinically normal, and eventually I did get to go home. That was what I was after. But in any event, one of the things that happened, and I kind of missed out on a lot of this. I'm going to ask Joanne to tell it, but apparently the doctor came and explained that the tumor, which was about the size of a tennis ball, had been on the part of the brain that produces music. And I want you to share what he said about that.
It produces music and math logic, and I can't remember the other things, but since my husband plays spontaneously, and one of the things I love is his music, I didn't know if he'd ever be able to play again or hear. So his hearing wasn't all that great before the surgery, but his music has improved, and that is a miracle. It really is.
Yeah, I've been in the habit of playing and singing spontaneously before the Lord, and I've been doing that in my private prayer closet, and I do it in worship services whenever I can. And I've avoided learning songs. One day I read a verse in Psalm 22, and it says that God inhabits the praise of his people. And I learned that the Hebrew word for praise is tehillim. Those are those spontaneous songs that come pouring out of the heart. There is a presence of God that is released with the spontaneous song of the Lord. And this is what I've really tried to give myself to ever since. I don't know, this was 10 or 15 years back. But I've sometimes the whole worship services without once using a song that anybody knew, and we would sometimes find choruses we could all sing together. God would give them spontaneously. And sometimes we've just sung from the heart for half an hour or an hour or even 2 hours at a time, depending on the congregation and what they have an appetite for. But there's a presence of God that is released. And as I was mentioning, Joanne and I have seen healing happen again and again in the presence of God. During this time of recovery, when it wasn't clear how much of my mind was going to come back, that was one of the reasons I asked for a guitar. In my hospital room, I started to say hotel room, but it's, goodness, it was room service beyond anything I've ever seen in a hotel. But I needed my guitar so I could pour out some spontaneous songs to the Lord. In the first few days, my left hand was very weak, and it was shaky, and it was hard to play the chords. It was hard to hold the strings down hard enough to keep them from buzzing. But within 2 or 3 days, my strength was coming back, and the nurses were actually asking me to keep my door open while I sang and played, because they said they could feel peace coming into the rest of the ward. And the music was peaceful, and they said it was good. So I went ahead and obliged them, because all I knew was I needed the presence of God, because I needed healing. So that's what that music was all about. Spontaneous songs of praise for the purpose of releasing the presence of God and staying in the presence of God to receive the healing that I so desperately needed. The thing with the presence of God and the thing with the song has been that again and again in our personal lives here at home, we sometimes will just turn aside and we will use some spontaneous worship in our own home. Sometimes when we're under pressure and a lot is going wrong, we just take time to stop everything. There is a secret place in God. And here's something wonderful. Jesus said one time, as he was lamenting Jerusalem, it was shortly before he was crucified, but he said, "Oh, Jerusalem, Jerusalem, how often I would have gathered you. I wanted to tug you under my wing," he said. And let that picture, just the way I've taken Joanne and pulled her to me, let that picture catch in your mind. That's what God wants to do with you. How do I get into the secret place? I let him tug me close to him. I don't know how to get there. You don't know how to get there. It's such a secret place, you and I can't figure it out. But it's responding to his love, letting him love us, letting him hold us close to him. That's where we begin. And we go into that secret place, and if the odds are against you, 11,000 to 1, let me say to you, you can be the one.